so close.
You're listening to the Bliss Podcast.
Welcome back to the Bliss Podcast, episode I Can't Remember. This is your host, Maicheya Rishidasa, and I'm here with His Grace, Purijit Prabhu. How are you doing, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, I'm very glad to be here with you today, with everyone, and you, and everyone, and you, and you, and you, and Srila Prabhupada ki jai!
Jai! Okay, so wonderful. Just a little introduction for those of you who are new to the podcast. I'm an insignificant rascal who sometimes hosts the podcast, and Purijit Prabhu is the founder of the Bhaktivedanta Lives in Sound Society, which you can find more information about if you go to the website, which we're going to link in the description down below, www.expandthebliss.com. There's all kinds of cool stuff on there. You can also find ebooks compiled by Purijit Prabhu, very nice, available for everyone. You can also get in contact with us through all of our different social medias, Instagram, Facebook, and the like. I think there's going to be more links down below. I can't remember everything we have. You can also send a donation on our platforms Patreon and GoFundMe. So everything will be there. Maybe if you're new to the Bliss Podcast and you're wondering what this podcast is all about, maybe you could give a quick summary, Prabhu.
We're discussing Krishna conscious philosophy as taught by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder, Acharya, and the spiritual master of the Hare Krishna movement. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a podcast where we discuss all things Krishna conscious. Sometimes takes different forms. I don't know if anyone was here for the...
No compromise.
No compromises, that's the main thing.
No compromise, no censorship, pure philosophy as taught by Prabhupada without any
Adulteration.
adulteration, ornamentation.
Ornamentation, that's a nice one. I like that word also. Yeah, this is raw Krishna philosophy. So, I don't know if anyone was here for the Deconstructing Koi Fresco podcast, but that was some raw Krishna philosophy also there. Sometimes we do this style of video where we deconstruct those who are preaching some kind of form of spirituality that is not exactly on par with real sanity. That's a better way of saying it. So stay tuned, because we're going to be deconstructing another one of these unscrupulous persons on today's podcast. But before we get into it, we'd like to give some thanks and also the Bliss News. Oh wait, I know the jingle is very attractive, a jingle, but okay. Okay, it was worth it to hear it. Okay, let's go into the Bliss News, considering the jingle. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Okay, the jingle is getting me riled up to do the Bliss News anyway, so... last podcast, we did, a couple podcasts ago, we were talking about going to London, England, and some other things also. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, this is the kind of main Bliss News. So our temple. That was an appropriate sound for the temple, right on key. Very nice for me. So the temple, the Bliss Temple, will be moving to Her Majesty's turf, the land of England, right in the heart of Maya, you can say, right into the heart of the material world, London town, and of course that will be a kind of a long-term operation. It will take some time to get underway, but that is now currently in the works. So I think you'll also probably have to excuse us for a possible change in the schedule of the podcast, or a change in the formatting of the podcast. That will be a possible result of this move. But look forward to new and exciting projects that will come out of this move, and new and exciting preaching, videos, everything.
So my trip, Prabhu, is going to land a plane.
Myself.
Yes, he's gonna go and try to get a job there in UK, since we need to rent an apartment, and for that, you need a job. So Maitreya is gonna try to find some temporary job for the sake of preaching, which is a great sacrifice on his part. Everyone should appreciate this great sacrifice. I mean, uh, yeah, getting a job is not an easy thing, and especially sacrificing, all that time that could be used for preaching, um, to work on a job is a great sacrifice, I think.
Well, working for Krishna is fun.
I'm
Can
just
we-
trying to, I'm just trying to, think of a way how to explain it to people
Yeah.
who actually are working on a
Working
job.
on a job, I was just thinking.
How is it a big sacrifice? Well, because the devotees who are engaged full time as Maitreya Prabhu, they're spending their whole day working to propagate this Krishna consciousness movement, which is not an easy task, and it is also a very time-consuming task. So Prabhu is gonna take a little break from this sort of preaching, and he will take care of the material, you can say, necessities, because we need a place, we need a contract, we need a lease, and so many other things to make this temple in London. So I'm gonna stay over here in Gibraltar. In the meanwhile, we have some more shipping of our temple paraphernalia to be done. So as soon as Maitreya Prabhu finds a suitable apartment, then we're gonna move everything there. We were discussing this for a long time, and we think that London could be a good place to start our preaching in a grand scale. So please praise this works out for us. All of you who are out there, all nice friends and devotees, please say a prayer to Krishna so we can propagate Krishna consciousness as taught by Srila Prabhupada very nicely in London.
Yeah, Jay. Well, yeah, it's. I guess also I could. Okay. I don't know. I don't know. Are you shutting me up, or is that an introduction? Yeah, I guess the way I look at it also is that, okay, there are some people who are meant to work in society, and some people who are meant to do the farming, and some people are meant to do the governmental stuff, and some people who are meant to do the spiritual kind of priestly work, and that's the way that society is actually meant to be split up. But
Due to lack
due to lack of the structure.
appreciation for the work that we do, we have to also take care of the material side, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to do both at the same time. We have to continue bringing new contents for everyone, and at the same time take care of the material necessity, because due to lack of funding. Anyway.
Yeah, it's also because the government, nothing is not the whole society is also not accustomed to this. The people who are like
Happy.
happy is also a good way of saying it. But people who are propagating God consciousness, in the eyes of society, are kind of like just weirdos who do nothing and take their yogurts. But actually, we're doing something that's much more important than just working hard for nothing. Of course, those who work jai, if you give donation to the Krishna consciousness movement, then your work is not futile. But if you're just working for nothing, for sense gratification, then yeah, there's ultimately no point. And the Brahminical class of men is made for the higher purpose of life. So it's kind of a force of circumstance that the society has made, that we have to go, or I have to go and get a job so that we can rent somewhere to stay. So yeah, that's just the way things are. It's not really so much a problem. Anyway, I think that's kind of all for the Bliss news. Maybe I'm being self-centered and I'm just not thinking outside of my own news. But what else is there outside of maybe we have news from Bliss Iceland or some other places?
We have made an agreement with our good friend Alexandra to do paintings for our upcoming book, The Teachings of Lord Buddha.
Okay.
So that's a very nice. She, Alexandra, is now getting ready to start the project, and yeah, Makancha Prabhu is, I think, now in Slovenia, right?
Right,
With
right.
Sabina Mataji and her friend. What is her name?
I am sorry if you're listening to this, Sabina's Mataji's friend, but I cannot remember your name. I do remember your cheerful Harry Ball, though you gave me when I was talking to you on the phone. So that was nice.
Yes, and well, we're gonna go to Gibraltar now. They're gonna open the borders after so many months.
Yeah.
We've been dried, no Sankirtan. We've been locked up here in Spain. So on Wednesday, now this Wednesday, they're supposed to open the borders. So we're getting ready with my Treya before he goes to London to do a nice Sankirtan there and some book distribution. And we're also gonna say hello to our good friend Jean.
Jay.
We haven't seen her for 4 months.
Right.
So yeah, that's the news.
Yeah, that's going to be ecstatic going on Sankirtan. We haven't been there for so long, and people are not so saturated with the Hare Krishnas that are usually there every day, pushing books on them and chanting the same thing over and over again. So now they're refreshed and they can get that happening again. So yes, Prabhu.
We also have some new articles coming up on the website expandabliss.com. Also some new ebooks. So wait for some nice treats, especially the Patreon members. They're gonna get some new presents. So yeah, some good stuff coming up.
Yeah, if you're a fan of ladus, which are like a sweet Krishna ball, very nice, toasted flour and sugar and other kinds of treats, then if you become a Patreon, Krishna might favor you with a ladu. I don't know. What do you think, Prabhu?
Yeah, or if you just give a donation, random donation,
Right.
then you might receive a sweet surprise in the
Okay.
mail.
Very nice. So I think that's about all for the Bliss news. And yeah, thank you to our consistent supporters, or actually anyone who supported. It's very nice of you. Thank you to Sabina Mataji. Thank you to Dushan. Thank you to Peter Kirshner. Yeah, Harley also. And also, Puraju Prabhu's mum is doing very nicely. And also listening to the podcast. That's also support. If you listen to the podcast regularly, that is also very nice. So thank you to all those who are regularly listening to the podcast. Very encouraging. So, yeah, let's...
Also, please share.
Yes.
We're losing the views.
What happened, guys? There was 80 views or so, and now we're down to the core. Of course, the core 25 people, the really strong listeners of the Bliss podcast. But let's at least double it. Come on.
Immediately, you must share now. Share on your Facebook, whatever, send it to your friends. Send them a message with a link, send them a chat message. Listen to this, man, this is really cool. Something like that. Otherwise, this podcast is doomed.
Yeah, as you're hearing this right now, you should not be on the podcast screen. You should already be on Facebook with the link, sending it to several friends. That is the...
Send it to at least 100, okay, 10 friends.
Okay, that's reasonable.
10 friends. Just send them a link and tell them, please listen to this. And become the part of the Expand the Bliss movement.
Right. Threaten them, blackmail them. If you don't listen to this, we're no longer friends on Facebook. That'll really get the Facebook people. So okay, yeah, let's dive into the stool. Oh boy, Krishna didn't like that. The mic came off the stick. We have an improv mic here at the Bliss Studios. So just excuse me for some technical difficulties. Okay, I think that's good. Now, we're going to discuss today a certain individual who is, let's say politely, how you say the right terminology. He is what we might know as a Mayavadi philosopher. He's someone who believes that ultimately God is impersonal and that we are all one consciousness. So just while we're getting the video loaded up here, a little background on this unnamed character. We won't say any names. You'll have to go find him if you want to go listen to this nonsense, which I don't recommend you do outside of the guidance of this video, this podcast. But I actually, unfortunately, I have to admit, frankly, that I was watching this gentleman before I came to Srila Prabhupada. I was experimenting with different kinds of spirituality and different philosophies about the absolute truth. And of course, the most prominent philosophy is the one that Srila Prabhupada came to smash to smithereens. And it's very prominent in the Western world. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, which is impersonal or voidist also philosophy. So that philosophy that says that ultimately there is nothing, not even everything is just matter, or there is spiritual, there is a God, but God is ultimately just everything. We are all God. There's no person. So this is obviously opposed to the personal or Vaishnava philosophy that God is a person, his name is Krishna, and we are his part and parcel servants eternally. There's no merging at any time. So this is the difference of the philosophies. And I think we have the video loaded up.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice, kind of. Let's give him a hear.
It's not just a random hodgepodge of events and things happening. Well, I want to explain to you why reality is structured exactly as it is. This is going to be the highest level understanding of reality and life that you can possibly have. And I've recently become conscious of this. I've had some...
I just like to start criticizing right off the bat that he says this is the highest understanding of consciousness and reality you can possibly have. But from where do you, this is pretty well dogmatic right from the gate. I mean, there's no backup for this. This man is posing himself as the only person or authority or only way to know this highest knowledge. So this is a little bit imposing right off.
No, it might be the highest, but let's see what it is.
Let's see what that knowledge is to test, okay?
new, deeper awakenings beyond anything I've explained thus far, which has deepened my understanding specifically of human behavior and human psychology and how it connects with existential questions about the nature of reality. And so the amazing thing is that it's possible to become fully omniscient and conscious of why the universe exists and why it is precisely as it is and not some other way. So this is what I'll be explaining here today. This, of course, requires an extremely open mind. This is some very advanced stuff. This is not a belief system or an ideology. Please don't take it as such.
So this is not a belief system or an ideology. Okay, so what it is, we're still yet to find out.
Right. It's the absolute truth, Prabhu.
He said that you can become fully omniscient
Yeah.
about how the universe was created, why the universe was created.
What the universe is, how it was created, what it is, like that.
And you can become fully omniscient.
It means fully aware of all these things.
Isn't omniscient mean aware of everything? Omniscient?
Yeah. Precisely. Aware of the universe, how it's created, everything. You're aware of everything.
So how can you become omniscient? Isn't the quality of omniscience eternal?
Well, I guess if you're aware of everything and you are aware of everything and you're also that thing, which is this man's philosophy ultimately, then yeah, how could you not suddenly be aware of everything?
That's the question. How you have shrunk your consciousness to the non-omniscience
Right,
in the first place.
right.
And then what is the use of trying to reach the omniscience from the non-omniscient stage?
Yeah.
And how is it possible?
That's another thing I was just thinking. He says you can become perfectly omniscient, but that means that you're imperfectly omniscient now. So how can you reach the perfectly omniscient stage through your imperfect means?
Yeah, you can't even conceive of the perfect omniscient ideal because you have imperfect, imperfectly
Omniscient.
omniscient. You're just soaked in nescience
Yeah.
right now. So how can you do that?
Right,
Well, we're yet to find out.
right. We have to hear from the source of omniscience, this gentleman himself.
Something. So there's a certain logic to reality and to God. God just means reality. I'll be using these words interchangeably. So I'm going to be talking about the logic of God. It's a very elegant logic, a very elegant sort of structure. So, where do we begin? What is reality? Reality is infinity. Reality is God. Reality is love. Reality is consciousness. All these words are identical at the deepest level. So reality is an infinite conscious field. This field is singular. It's one. There aren't multiple of these fields. There's only one of this field. This field is
But the thing is, good sir, that in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that there are two fields. There is the knower of the fields, and then also the knower of all the fields. So my deal is that I would rather take the knowledge of Krishna, God himself, in the Bhagavad Gita, you know, that book that is studied by all transcendentalists worldwide. Okay, although it's misinterpreted some places here and there, only Srila Prabhupada presents it as it is. But that book, which is accepted as the authority on the absolute truth, of which you are now speaking, rather than something that you say you have become aware of, but no one else knows whether you've become aware of it. You have no backing up to say that this is actually the truth. And now you're just saying that it is like that, but you're directly contradicted by Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, he said that this is not a belief system or an ideology, and please don't think it is like that, right? He said.
Yeah.
So why not? I mean,
sounds like
it
it.
sounds like a dogma. Why should I not think? Just because he says so, I should not think, you know? So, yeah. And another point is that this singularity, that there's only one truth, one path, and there no other path. It's just a convenient way how to say that you listen to me and only to me and disregard everything else.
Right.
And the first thing that any intelligent man can perceive is that he is talking to an audience. So that's where the singularity ends. It's just a very nice fairy tale that we all won. That if we all won, then what is the use of you, speaking anything? I am you, you are you. That's it. Why you need to teach me anything?
Yeah, if you've become perfectly omniscient of the fact that your audience is actually you in ignorance, but what I don't know what you means from your perspective, you're God, so you tell me. But if you are perfectly cognizant, then why do you need to enlighten yourself, which is your audience? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, if the audience and you are non-different, then if you reach perfection, then your audience automatically should reach perfection. So there's no need of enlightening them anymore.
Right.
You just do your thing, and automatically everyone becomes enlightened simultaneously.
Yeah. So let's move on and hear some more nectar from the mouth of God.
completely unlimited. This field is what you're immersed in right now and what you've experienced your entire life and what you will ever experience. It's everything that could ever possibly be experienced by any living being or creature or anything, even inanimate objects. All of
Excuse me?
What?
Inanimate objects?
Isn't the definition of an inanimate object something that cannot experience anything?
Let's move on.
it is part of this infinite field of consciousness which comprises the entire universe. So ordinarily we like to think of consciousness as something that biological beings have. No. Consciousness is that field, that impersonal field which dreams up the entire universe, including humans, animals, plants, planets, rocks, stars, everything that could ever be experienced.
How can an impersonal field dream of something? When you say dream, there must be a dreamer, a personality.
Yeah.
So these are just nonsense words,
Yeah.
contradictory.
This word dream, you can only think of that word because you can think of that word. You can experience a dream. You are a person, a singular consciousness. Other people can also experience a dream. What experience do you have that something impersonal dreams?
Or that the inanimate objects are experiencing. Like, these are just some complete foolish nonsense, bogus things that no one has any evidence of, or it's completely unscientific. It's a real baloney.
But yeah, I just like to also bring up a point in this regard. I kind of mentioned earlier about the Bhagavad Gita, but something that you'll notice that Prabhupada or anyone who's preaching Prabhupada's mission, they do, or anyone who's actually following, like a bona fide system of knowledge, acquiring knowledge, they will quote from an authorized authority, a scripture or a previous acharya, saintly person, like that. There's no, rocks are actually conscious, and they are also God, and they also experience God. And I just say that, and I don't explain from quoting from somewhere else. You were actually saying in the class this morning that this is why Krishna consciousness is a science, because you take from a previous authority. You don't just make up random things and then expect people to accept it as truth.
Yeah, just like in the scientific community, right? The scientists, they give reference to the previous scientists, Albert Einstein, Newton law, and this and that. If a person comes and he said, I need a grant for my scientific study, and it's like this because I say so, they're going to laugh at him. You need the backup. This is called science. So he says that, don't take it as a belief system, this guy. It's not a belief system or ideology, but by his words, we see that the opposite is a fact, is the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, even, you might say that, well, Einstein, he pioneered the field. So who did he have to refer to? But Einstein was using a system of mathematics. Everyone knew the system, and he based his conclusions off of that system of mathematics. So similarly, you have to refer to Bhagavad Gita or Vedanta Sutra or something, rather than you just say it whimsically and then, that's actually the truth. That is God.
Even God himself quotes the authority. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers to the Vedanta Sutra,
Yeah.
Brahma Sutra. He's quoting an authority. Krishna has accepted a spiritual master. So even God, if you want to say I am a God, even God himself is quoting the authority to show the example of how to behave, how to teach. This is such a thing that I am God and now listen to me. I mean, this is exactly the definition of a belief system, and ideology, and a dogma.
Yeah. Dangerous. Very dangerous. He could say anything now. He could say, I am God, and as God, perfectly omniscient, I know that if you give me everything that's in your wallet, you will also become God. And if someone's foolish, very foolish, he'll believe him. So it's very dangerous to pose as this absolute authority with no reference.
Let's move on.
Is dreamed up by this field.
Similarly, you've dreamed up this philosophy.
How can a field have a dream? That's such a nonsense.
You could think of it as an infinite mind.
Oh, so now he's thinking you can think of it as a mind because we're so imperfect, we can't conceive of things where of a world where inanimate objects have experience or fields have dreams. We're very dumb, right? We're very foolish. So we can think of it as an infinite mind. Now he's giving us a little crutches there.
A little concession, you know.
Okay.
That's what it is. It's infinity. Why is this field singular and not multiple? How come there can't be multiple gods, multiple realities, multiple universes, multiple consciousnesses? There can't, because what you have to do is you have to contemplate the nature of this field. When you start to contemplate it, you start to realize that every boundary between two objects within this field is actually contained within the field itself and part of the field, and therefore is not anything that separates the two objects. So for example, we could have like an apple and a banana, and then we could say, well, but these are two separate objects. Or we could have your mom and your dad, and we could say, well, these are two separate objects, two separate beings with two separate consciousnesses. But that's not really the case, because what is actually the case is that both of these objects are supposedly separated by some boundary. You might say, well, the banana and the apple are separated by the air in between them. But is that really something that separates the two, or is that actually something that unites the two? So you have to realize that all these boundaries between your mom and your dad, a banana and an apple, and so forth, all these boundaries are themselves imaginary, and that they all ultimately break down such that you're always in a single unified field. This single unified field is your field.
So he doesn't really explain why. He just says they're imaginary and that's it.
That's all.
He doesn't explain why. You know, if I tell you that actually, Prabhu, you are imaginary, you don't exist. You know, so I can kick on your face, I can kill you, I can steal from you, but you're imaginary. I think at least I should have some backing up. It's a very nonsense philosophy.
But I think, Prabhu, I'd subscribe to your YouTube channel and give you a like and listen to your whole YouTube video. Also, I'd like to point out, this might be a little too nitpicky, tell me if I'm wrong, but as someone who's claiming that he is perfectly omniscient God, he makes a lot of faults with the voice, can't come up with the words, or is struggling to explain some concepts there. So you're going to have to do a little bit better to convince me that you are the all-perfect knowledge, center point of everything, God.
Yeah, like he also says that you have to realize that everything is ultimately one. So when we speak of realization, there's a person and there's the realization. You have realization.
Right.
If you have no person, you know, what is the you? As I said before, why on earth are you explaining this to us?
Right.
Just shut up.
Also, if the knower of the knowledge and the knowledge are one, then he says you need to realize. But there's no difference between you and the realization, the knowledge. So how you can?
I think someone should explain him his own philosophy, because he still makes a distinction between you and the realization.
Right.
In fact, according to his own philosophy, the realization and you are supposed to be one. Therefore, there's no, at any point, a time when you actually realize the thing, because you are the realization,
You are the realization.
according to his philosophy.
And if you're the realization, how did you ever come to a point where you start need to realizing the realization? How can you ever come to ignorance if you are purely the realization itself?
Yeah, so these are nonsense words of a nonsense person. Krishna says very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, Natu evam jatu nasam natvam neme janaripa nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarva vayamata param. Never was there a time when I, namely Krishna, you, Arjuna, nor all these kings assembled in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, never was there a time when they did not exist, and there shall never be a time when they cease to exist. The individuality is established as an eternal fact in this shloka. And even from the logical point of view, it doesn't make any sense. If there is God who is impersonal, how did he become a person, and for what reason? And and if God is ultimately impersonal, why we person? How can the impersonal emanate a personality? We see from the observation in this world that the impersonal energy is always coming from a personal. Just like you might have a project, your project is impersonal, but you're a person. It's not that the project created you. You always create your project. This personality, he made his YouTube video because he's a person. It's not that the YouTube video created him.
Right.
That's a nonsense.
Right.
We don't have such an experience in this world that imperson creates a person. Why on earth should we accept this proposal that, and simply because he says so, that the impersonal creates a person?
Right.
Why should we accept this? Simply because he says so.
Because he's God, Prabhu.
Well, that also he says, but what is the evidence? I can also say I am God.
Yeah.
Prabhupada, he mentioned it. He said, yes, I am also God. I am the face-kicking God, and I kick on your face. You stop me.
Right.
If you're God.
Right.
God is no competitor. That's the meaning of God. Like he says, that there's a singularity. There cannot be many gods.
Right.
That is true.
Yes.
Yes. So, as soon as you have a competitor, then that proves that you're not that singular God.
Right, because I can say, I am God, and I have a different philosophy to this guy. And then immediately, what can he do? If I am God, and ultimately God is all one, I mean, how does he even compute that? If I'm also, according to his vision, if I'm also God, and I come to him as he's God, and I say, well, actually God is something different, then what would he even say? You can't say anything.
Another point is that there's apple and banana, mom and dad.
Yeah.
He says that these distinctions are imaginary. Even if it is so, even if it's an imaginary, when you say imagination, it's based on reality.
Right.
Imagination is based on reality. You can only imagine that which is in reality.
Right. For example, you can't imagine a new color or a new sound. It's not possible. You can only imagine off of two things which you've already experienced and combining them at top at most.
Yes, therefore, the question is, even if these distinctions are imaginary, why are they imaginary? Why this imagination is here? Why we live in this illusion? Who put it here?
Right.
Why we in this?
Right.
Why do we need to realize the oneness? Like if you assume that this seeing boundary is illusion, so it's kind of like you can say you in a state of illusion, you're diseased, right? You have a mental disease. You see distinctions instead of seeing the oneness and unity and no conflicts and wonderful. So if you have a disease, then you should know the cause of the disease before you take the treatment. Otherwise, you can get some poison. Instead of medicine, you might take some poison.
Right.
If you don't know what your disease is, then you might not cure your disease. So he doesn't explain anything about this.
Right.
In our Krishna conscious philosophy, Srila Prabhupada explains very nicely. He says that these distinctions are not illusory, but they're temporary. You are eternal soul, minute, part and parcel of God. You're not God, you're part of God. You have the same quality as God, but you're not omniscient or omnipresent and all these things, because that quality of omniscience is eternal. That omniscient will never become covered by illusion. Then there's no meaning to God. If he becomes covered by illusion, he's no longer God. God cannot be conquered by anything. And what to speak of illusion? If God is conquered by illusion, then illusion is God. Then there's no meaning to anything
Right.
you say. because God is illusion. So everything is imaginary then if God is illusion. So these things are temporary, and they are the cause of our material attachment and therefore suffering, because we are eternal and nothing temporary can satisfy our inner selves. So, but if we use these things in the service to God, Krishna, then these things, they revive their spiritual nature. So in our Krishna consciousness, we do not deny distinctions. Quite the opposite. There's a saying, variety means mother of enjoyment. The more you dovetail things in Krishna consciousness, the more ecstatic this world becomes. We don't have such a philosophy that it's all imagination. This is the philosophy of frustrated people. It's all just an illusion. This person probably had some frustration in his life. And that's why he's propagating this kind of philosophy that, it's all imagination. It doesn't exist. If you are perfectly satisfied and happy in your life, you will not say, everything is just a dream. It has no meaning.
Right.
Yeah, this is, so, yeah.
Very nice.
Go on.
A little bit, I think. Give some time.
It's not just some impersonal field out there somewhere. It's you.
So now we're coming to the very frequent symptom of a rascal nonsense Mayavadi.
Contradiction.
Yes. Did you hear that?
I did. He said, maybe we can get a replay on that one. Just for everyone, just so we can be clear.
You are the field.
That's I think clear enough. He says that there is no impersonal field. You are the
ultimately break down such that you're always in a single unified field. This single unified field is your field. It's not just some impersonal field out there somewhere. It's you.
Huh? If it's a unified field, as in there's not individual persons, there's not individuality, it's unified, then how can it be my field? There is no me to experience the field. That means it is an impersonal field. There's no separate persons in the field.
How confusing, after he established all this nice impersonal philosophy, now he's coming back dividing between you and the impersonal field, and
us also, that you have your field, I have my field. So
this guy, if you listen to people like this, your mind will be nothing but agitated more and more and more, because there's no substance there. This guy is just like talking something, then he switches completely something else, contradicting the things he has stated previously. And, his talk has pretty much no meaning.
Yeah.
There's no meaning.
Srila Prabhupada, he nicely smashes this kind of philosopher by saying they are simply word juggling, which is a very interesting phrase. He has one word, the field or whatever, impersonal fields, and then he juggles it with another, that it's your fields. So he's just making the words sound very nice, very eloquent speaking, deep, as you said, the highest, most advanced knowledge, but actually it's, like you say, just like an assembly of meaningless things that sounds very nice, and it tricks people.
It reminds me of like a dog chasing his own tail. There's another word used in the Vedas called manoratena, that he is carried by the chariot of his mind.
Right.
He doesn't know what he's saying. He's basically just being carried away by the mind, triggered by his false ego, and he's just speaking something. But when you analyze what he says, there's no substance or meaning. It's just one big blob of nonsense.
Right. You have to take the whole thing as a whole. If you listen to it like each part and part, okay, it sounds very nice. It appeals to everyone's desire in the material world to be God. Actually, that's why we're all here, because we want to be Krishna. So if someone comes along and says, oh yes, you are God, then it sounds very appetizing. But because it's not backed up by anything, because it's not on any authority, you can see there's contradictions in everything, like Prabhu was saying. So yeah, if you have to break down this kind of philosophy, and then you can see where the nonsense is. So maybe, I don't know if you've had enough, you're saturated with impersonal philosophy, you think you're good? Okay, I think I also.
Srila Prabhupada, he says, very interesting on these kind of people. This is from the 4th canto, 29th chapter, 28th verse. Purport. Because of associating with the modes of nature, the living entity gets a variety of bodies from the 8,400,000 forms. It is clearly explained herein that the living entity has a little independence indicated by the word svadrik, meaning one who can see his own welfare. The living entity's constitutional position is very minute, and he can be misled in his choice. He may choose to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A servant may desire to start his own business and imitate his master, and when he chooses to do so, he may leave the protection of his master. Sometimes he is a failure, and sometimes he is successful. Similarly, the living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, starts his own business to compete with the Lord. There are many competitors out to attain the Lord's position, but to become like the Lord is not at all possible. Thus, there is a great struggle for existence with the material world as different parties try to imitate the Lord. Material bondage is caused by deviation from the service of the Lord and attempts to imitate Him. The Lord is imitated by Mayavadi philosophers who try to become one with the Lord in an artificial way. When the Mayavadi philosophers think of themselves as liberated, they are under the delusion of mental concoction. No one can become one with or equal to God. To imagine this is to continue one's bondage in material existence. So, actually this is our main problem, that we try to imitate God, we try to become God. So listening to these kind of people simply aggravates our problems in this material existence. What to speak of solving them. Here's another one. Prabhupada said, this is a quote from the Ishopanishad, but also Bhagavad Gita. The complete whole is not formless. If he is formless, or if he is less than any other thing, then he cannot be the complete whole. The complete whole must have everything within our experience and beyond our experience. Otherwise, it cannot be complete. So this denial of varieties, it's all just one, and there's no distinction between one and the other, is a limitation. And he says, God is infinity and so on and so on. But at the same time, he says that there should not be varieties. So he's putting limitation on God. There are varieties, but these varieties are eternal, full of knowledge and full of ananda, and they're all related to Krishna. There's a Krishna, there is associates, there's paraphernalia, there is planets, so many unlimited varieties, and they all participate in giving pleasure to Krishna.
Right.
This is the real thing. So, and you can immediately have this realization, even without being so-called omniscient, if you simply chant this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Nama that's the actual way to realize the absolute truth, God, not by hearing from some guy who claims to be God on YouTube. I just also like to bring up just one point that I just like a realization that he mentioned this last thing about the absolute. If the absolute is formless, that he can't have, he must have everything within and without our experience. So that is the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, Achinta Abheda Beda Tattva, that in the absolute, God has both impersonal and personal within his existence. Otherwise, there is no meaning. So that is why philosophers like this gentleman here, Mayavadi philosophers, they say that the phenomenal world, that which you're in right now, is illusion. And if it's false, if there's no meaning to it, then not only is there duality in the absolute truth, which is meant to be one, but there's also, it doesn't contain everything, like you said. It doesn't contain varieties. So that means something is separate from God, and nothing can be separate from the absolute. That's what makes it absolute. So the Achinta Beda Abheda Tattva philosophy is perfect because it contains both, whereas the Mayavadi philosophy is actually not absolute at all.
That is the highest philosophy.
So I don't know if you have anything to add, Prabhu, on this point, or we're just going to let people think it over and not go and watch this guy's video, but instead go back and watch the other podcasts that we have available on the channel, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Bliss Podcast. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.